my name is Anna Smith, and I am the Executive Director of the Quinnen Street Project. If you're watching this video, then you are probably a student in our Drama in the Classroom program and are watching this video as a part of your lesson about tech and design in theater. Hopefully, your teaching artist or artists have given you an idea of what this video is going to be about. But just in case they haven't, I will quickly introduce you to all of the people on this call and the purpose of this video. First of all, this video is replicating an example of what is called a production meeting. Production meetings happen when a theater company is producing a play and they help bring together the director and all of the designers. For example, in your class, your director is your teaching artist or artists. You are usually inhabiting the role of actor or performer, but for today, you are going to put yourself in the shoes of a technician or designer. When a theater company or collective comes together to produce a play, they do need a director and actors, but they also need a stage manager, a set designer, a lighting designer, a costume designer, and a sound designer. There are lots of other designers and technicians they might need too, like a props designer for things the actors hold or move around, like a coffee mug, or other things that you can hold in your hands. A projection designer, a wig and makeup designer, which some costume designers like Amy can do too, and lots of other specialists. They work with the director, that's me, to bring their vision and concept to life. For the purposes of this video, we have imagined a world in which we are producing a production of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. We have decided to set our production in New York in 1986. And this meeting is specifically addressing Act 1, Scene 5, AKA the ball, where Romeo and Juliet meet. You will hear how that informed the different designers' ideas. Now, I am going to hand it over to our stage manager because as the manager, it's their job to run the meeting.
Thank you, Anna. Since this is our first production meeting, I'd like for everyone to go around and if we could say our name and our pronouns for some introductions, that would be wonderful. I'll go first. My name is Annie and I will be your stage manager.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm the set designer and my pronouns are she, her, or they, them.
My pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi, I'm Krista Smith, she, her, hers, and I'm the lighting designer.
I'm Amy, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the costume designer.
My name is Michael Kelly, I'll be your sound designer, pronouns he, him, his.
And my name is Anna, my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the director and choreographer.
Wonderful. Now that we all know each other, let's go ahead and turn it over to our set designer so that we can establish our where for the play.
Thank you, Annie. So as the set designer, it's very important to know the when and where, which Anna already mentioned. If we'll go to the next slide. Our when is 1986, our where is New York City. And then for me, it's important to list out the different places in the play that we'll go to during the play. So there's outside or on the street. There's the Capulet's house, which includes both the party or ball, as well as Juliet's room and Juliet's balcony. There's a church and a churchyard scene, as well as we do visit the apothecaries very briefly during the play. There might also be some other smaller scenes set in some different places, but this gives me a good sense of all the different venues that I'll need to include in my set design. When I'm beginning a set design, I like to look at the people who live in the world that I'm going to create. So for me, I start with images of people from that time and that place. For our example, 1980s New York. So these are a myriad of different people. And for me, I like to give them names of the characters. So we have Juliet with the blonde girl, and then maybe Mercutio in front of the American flag type symbol, two party goers underneath the nice little heart there. And then I like to go on to what the world looks like. And that starts with color. I started as a scenic painter, so for me, color is where everything starts. I love the colors of the 80s. We can see the beautiful purples and fuchsias combined with the teals and the greens, and that really stood out to me. So you'll see a lot of different colors, some more realistic with the tapes and the graffiti, and then some just more design oriented with the different shapes. And then we see pictures of actual New York. I wanted to get a really good, strong sense of what that world was. So you see the skyline in neon, which really stood out to me. You see this realistic kind of street scene that's a little hyper realistic with the different colors and the very saturate tones up here in the corner. And then you see kind of the black and white and the graffiti and a little bit of the grunge that is true to New York City at the time. Then just to give a sense of Juliet's room and what the interiors might look like, I picked a lot of interior shots, lots of colors, very geometric designs, very different colors put in the same place. That really stood out to me. And then for today's focus, it's the Capulets Ball. So I wanted to get a sense of what that might look like at the time. And even though these are club scenes and we're set in the interior of the Capulets mansion, this is where they would have been looking for ideas for this ball scene. So we have the Limelight, Studio 54, CBGB, a lot of different ideas with that very neon, very saturate, lots of levels, things like that are very important to my, my thinking when we're going into the Capulets Ball. So once I have all these images, it's really important to work with your team because the set, yes, it's a big thing, it needs to be built, all of that, but the lights have to shine on it, the costumes can't be caught on it, it might inform where speakers are or how sound bounces, so you really want to communicate to your team and show them lots of pictures, so that way they can get a feel for what you're thinking and give you some feedback to what they're thinking, and after you do that teamwork, that's when you begin drafting. And as the set designer, I do this a couple times during the play because every time I get more feedback, I need to go back and maybe alter the drafting and alter the setup of the set. So drafting looks like this. This is a program that I use called SketchUp online that's free. And this gives a sense of how the play will look from the top. So this gives depth and how big things are and where they're set. So you know that everyone has enough room to move around the set and what that looks like. And this is a 3D rendering from the same program of what that set looks like in real life. So as you can see, we have the space, we have little people to give a sense of size. And if we move forward one, we can just get that front perspective. I loved playing with levels on this play because there's a lot of people in the Capulets Ball and giving that sense of little spaces where smaller groups could sit and talk as you see a lot in this particular play with Romeo and Juliet, but also that sense of, you can see that picture again of the skyline of New York set on the street that's just a little off complete realism with the very saturate colors and things like that. So if we're moving into a world where you have to do live theater on a video or live stream service, green screens are your friend. Green screens are basically one color that you can put behind an actor and you can replace it with different videos or images. So you can get them really cheap and then you can replace what's behind an actor, like this video of a party or a nightclub. And what's great about this video is that everything's a little blurry in the background, which is great because you want to keep that focus on the actor and you don't want to distract by what's in the background. And this is also how the eye functions in reality. Whatever's behind the person in front is going to be just slightly more blurry than what you're focusing on. Also, you don't see the faces because you don't want someone to focus on like someone smiling or laughing or moving in the background, and faces draw the eye. So it's nice here that we don't see faces. So this is one way you can use a green screen video or a video behind someone to really give that sense of place on a live streaming service. The other thing you do, if you don't have a green screen, don't worry. There's lots of things you can do. And so behind me, you can see that I have set up a bunch of things from my house. And so I would set up meetings with the actors to talk about what they might have in their house. So here's some examples of like old party decorations or things that you can use from the house. If people have these, that's great. And or you can spend a little bit of money and get them to the actors if you want something specific behind them. Also, you can ask them for anything else in their house, like old clothes. Like you can see, this is actually a dress that I own that gives a little kind of texture behind me. I've also got pillows with cool geometric designs, and just different things to set behind me to make that the focus if I'm in close, so it looks like I'm at a party or there's at least more than just my house behind me.
Anna, as the director of the show, does this design work with your vision?
Absolutely. Katie listened to my original vision of incorporating the gritty side of 1980s New York with the greed and opulence and the rich folks of the present day Manhattan elites. And I think it's great. Thank you so much, Katie.
Perfect. I also appreciate Katie for her creation of the ground plan, which will definitely come in handy for when we have to block out and tape out our set on the stage for rehearsals. It's definitely a big help. And so now that we know our where, let's go ahead and check in with our lighting designer who can help illustrate our when.
Thank you, Annie. Yeah, lighting really helps communicate our when and where through different compositions of lights that will be tucked all around the stage. Lighting design works to paint and sculpt the set and the actors to provide both illumination to see them and additional visual context. Sometimes lighting needs to recreate different times of day. So we'd start with thinking about what's happening with our main sources of light. And in nature, that would be light from the sun or the reflected light from the moon. But really, there can be many different light sources involved, like street lamps or shop signs for scenes that might be outside in a city. For scenes that are inside, like this particular scene of the party in Romeo and Juliet, I started by researching and thinking about what types of light sources would be in the Capulets' party in 1986 New York City. From my historical research, I know that there are different types of neon and multicolored chandeliers that are very popular, which would add a lot of color possibilities. So I'd love if we could add touches or elements of neon into the set, and maybe even a few chandeliers for this scene. But if not, I'd still like to use these as inspiration for the feel of the light and the colors of the light I'd like to use, especially in sections of dancing. I'd want to use bold colors and different angles to highlight the movement and interaction and work with the beats of the song. For instance, if a song went da, 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 we could go pink, green, orange, blue, for example. So what different light sources, so different light sources, we can start to look at how those affect the color and texture and just kind of vibe and move on a person, on our actors. We see how the direction, the intensity, the mix of colors help us connect time and place. But lighting can also go beyond reality and heighten or abstract life to pair with the emotional storytelling of what the characters are saying or what they're experiencing. Color and direction are both particularly great ways to do this and possible for a Zoom version. For translating into Zoom, I encourage you to look around your home for light sources. This can be light from a window, a table lamp, even your phone or your computer screen, looking for something that lights you or your surroundings in a way that helps tell the story of where the character is and what's going on in the scene. So for me, if I was gonna practice figuring out lighting for me in my house, if I was going to start practicing what the lighting could be like or look like, I would start finding things like a lamp and see what that looks like. And you can see how that looks on my face, and I can see in my video kind of what that's doing. Okay, I like that. And I can add a flashlight, and I could decide I wanted it pointed at myself, but that's a little intense. So I found a plastic colored binder. And so if I put that over the light, suddenly now it's purple. So let's put that here. Let's cover it. And then because I'm a lighting designer and I also have lots of fun light up doodads in my house, I made myself a little neon sign. So I'm gonna put that up on the wall behind me and turn that on. So just have fun with everything you can find in your home, play around with it, and have a good time.
I absolutely love that, Krista. Do you have any notes, Anna?
No. Wait, yes. Yes, I do want to make sure that Krista and I have a conversation about my staging for the dialogue in the ballroom scene, because I assume that we're going to go from dancing to some of the small dialogue moments, and I want to talk about how we can pop out the actors who are speaking in those moments.
Yes, I agree. I think that's a really important aspect of those scenes, being able to have big, broad focus lighting wise, but then being able to really kind of zero in or iris in on two people or one person when they're having an interior moment or a moment of dialogue. We can definitely do that. We can plan that in the lighting to make sure we have specials available and that we'll have cueing to accomplish that.
Ooh, goody. And because the ballroom scene is also where Romeo and Juliet meet, I would love to have, when they meet, for those who don't know, when they meet, their dialogue talking to each other actually makes a sonnet, makes a love poem. And I would love to make the light as lovey as possible, maybe some pinks and reds and things like that.
Yeah, I think there's a way to do that, especially if we wanted to start having a signature color that they start going into of moments where it becomes super romantic. That's something that we could revisit later in the show and kind of have as a visual calling card for them.
Ooh, fun. And maybe we can put something like dim and spooky or sad on like Tybalt, since it makes him so mad.
Yeah, I was going to ask how we thought about blocking that scene, particularly if maybe he's peeking around something or like coming up or down the stairs. Maybe there's a way we can have slashes of light through parts of the set that give him a little something spooky.
Great.
Totally.
Thank you so much, Krista.
Yeah, good to know on all of that. I'll go ahead and put all of that in my notes, also known as a report that I send out after each production meeting to help remind us all of what we discussed. So since we now know about our lights to help us shape our space, let's go ahead and hear from our sound designer for more about the when for the show.
Well, thank you, Annie. The job of a sound designer can be kind of wide-ranging. Usually the best place to start is having a discussion with the director about what the tone of the show should be expected to sound like. Are we going heavy or light or really loud or quiet and subdued? That sort of stuff. Also, knowing exactly when the time period is that the play takes place is key. So you can draw from all of the music that was ever recorded, but actually having restrictions makes things easier to work from a basis of reality. So we said that it's New York City, 1986, and that's a very hard cutoff for nothing that would be from 1987 or later. I like turning to authoritative documentation, and who doesn't love lists? So I pulled out this book from my shelf, the All Music Guide to Hit Singles, so I could get a refresher on what the songs of the day were. They're organized in this book by month, yearly, so that I could get a quick snapshot of what was on the radio in, say, the summer of 1986. And so here we go. Bangles, Bananarama, Steve Winwood, Timex Social Club, that kind of stuff. So knowing that for our ball scene, that the element of making it seem like it was in a cool New York City nightclub, with the look and feel of that time period, I turned to another book from my shelf called Last Night a DJ Saved My Life, which chronicles the importance of DJ culture. And there are a few chapters that go into the development of disco from the late 70s into the very new, at the time, electro, hip-hop, and Paradise Garage scenes. There's a picture of DJ Larry Levan in Paradise Garage. So while mainstream top 40 music informs what's going on in popular culture at the time, looking at what an actual DJ might be playing at an underground event was more in line with what the scene of the play might sound like. Instrumental, gritty, electro-influenced tracks. Finally, this magazine that I have, Record Culture, interviews DJs, current and historical, as a great source of information. There's a really nice breakout section here that reveals these really cool invites that New York City graffiti artist Keith Haring designed for exclusive parties. You might recognize his style. And it seems like invitations like these could extend to the very happening and chic party that the Capulets were throwing, further solidifying musical choices that are more generally on the underground tip. And while I love Thriller, I'm going to play a little bit of music for you. I'm opting for instead this very 80s sounding bit of music called Problemes d'amour, which I think in French that means love problems, which thematically very on point for Romeo and Juliet. It's got a quirky, robotic, crisp disco feel to it, funky hip-hop bass line, and a proto-house stomp to it. So this is the actual record that you can find the song on from the 80s. It's from 1984 in Europe, 85 in the US. There's some lyrics, but they can be edited out so that it doesn't interfere with the dialogue. And the playback happens on a program called QLab that I'm running right now, which then transmits through the system of speakers that have been decided upon. So part of the job is deciding what music you use, sure, and then if we're also going to have sound effects for when the characters are out in the street or in a park or at the seashore, then the choices of ambience like car traffic or air traffic, wind and crickets and stuff like rain, thunder, fireworks, dogs, etc. All of that becomes part of the design choices too. They're all chosen ahead of time, and then during tech, the levels are set for the volume with respect to the actor dialogue and the transitions. Another component then is also about selecting your speakers and where they get placed inside the theater. Some theaters have limited inventory, so others have endless inventory. You can scale up or scale down depending on what's available and what's absolutely necessary. Also, in most places now, actors wear microphones, usually well hidden in their costumes. The sound designer is responsible for assigning microphones, and since they're all wireless, also picking out the best combination of radio frequencies to not interfere, along with hardware brands. I drafted up a sample of paperwork that would often be created for just such a show, which features the character names along with a few brands of microphones we could opt for, both the transmitters and the microphone wire that connects to the transmitter. The microphone wire is worn over the ear near their mouth, and the transmitter usually lives in a pouch of elastic along their waist. Also, there's routing for the QLab channels, the program that I was talking about, sound management, for the system so we can have the music coming out of the main speakers, or maybe from the surround speakers behind you, or maybe emphasize a bit more of the subwoofers that prioritize low-end sound, like bass, or maybe even speakers that are like literally on stage, either for effect or to assist the actors in hearing their music cues. Lots going on for sound. If it's happening for Zoom, well, that's an entirely different challenge. One that so far we don't actually have good solutions for. I would lobby for that sequence to be pre-recorded and edited because Zoom right now does not like overlapping dialogue, let alone people speaking while music plays in the background.
And thank you for that gorgeous paperwork as well. That's really going to help us coming into Tech Week. Anna, do you have any notes for Michael?
Yes, one quick thing. True Colors by Cyndi Lauper was the #1 song when I was born in October of 1986. Can we include that in the sound design at some point?
Yeah, I could totally imagine that working as the Friars theme.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Michael. Now that we have a good sense of what the stage and lighting is going to look like and what the world will sound like, let's go ahead and turn it over to our costume designer so we can see what the play will maybe look like.
I'm going to go ahead here and share my screen. So I have a little presentation here for us to look at. When I begin research, I like to start with art from the period. So this was a painting I found of New York City in 1986. I was especially drawn to the colors and the colors in relation to the research that we've already seen from Katie and Krista as we begin to create a world together. Like Michael, I was also drawn to the work of graffiti artist Keith Haring, especially because his work in that time became so popular in public spaces and became popular as this sort of convergence of high and low art. I saw his black and white work as something that sort of fit into the world of Romeo and Juliet as characters. Often Juliet is in white traditionally. And looking at this first image, I thought, well, in our version, what if Juliet is in black? And that sort of turns the whole design on its head. So if Romeo and Juliet are in black and white, the rest of the characters could be in color. So from there, I began researching what clothing in 1986 generally within the country looked like. So this was sort of a starting point. And from there, I can get into more specifics. So looking at something held at the Capulets house, who are the Capulets as people? I started with researching the Grammys, the Oscars, and the Met Gala because we're looking at the New York elite of 1986. So we see Cher here at the Met Gala. Perhaps that is something like what Lady Capulet would be wearing at the ball. From here, it gets a little more exciting as I start to think about younger characters or more diverse clothing. I was very drawn to this dress here as a combination of a solid and a texture pattern that could work well for some of the younger characters. Here we also see a lot of texture that comes in that could start to play into this idea of high and low fashion that we would see with the young people at the ball. Getting into men, you know, where can the clothing become more exciting but still seem fancy enough to wear to this upscale party? I loved that this had a pop of color in the socks. For me, Michael Douglas in Wall Street was a huge inspiration, thinking about these characters and perhaps who they would become were they to live through the play. And Michael Douglas's character is someone that the young men in this play could be growing into. And I especially love that even though it's menswear, it's not boring. The tie is patterned, there's a stripe on the suspender, there's even a subtle window pane plaid on the pants. So from there, I started to think about Romeo and Juliet because at the end of the day, the scene is largely about them. So if Juliet is in black, I put Romeo in white. And a huge inspiration for the ball was my favorite ball scene from 1986, which would be Labyrinth. And so just thinking about where there are bits of magic and whimsy that could come into that scene. And here I began to look at modern clothing retailers that have an 80s flair, because if you think about no matter when you're doing a show, you're not doing the show in that year, you are doing your current year's interpretation of that year. So doing this show now, we're looking at our year's interpretation of 1986 as opposed to 95's interpretation of 86. So it's always a little bit different. And then I got into the men's clothing. Here I was very inspired by this jacket that Michael Jackson wore to the Grammys and Freddie Mercury as ways to go into Mercutio being a little more frivolous than some of the other characters and starting to bring in texture and pattern. And then looking at Tybalt and Paris as a little more streamlined, a little more leaning towards that Wall Street look. ASOS was a big place that I looked for clothing that would be a good price point and also fit in the 80s aesthetic. And then from there, I started to think about our background characters and sort of what they would look like against various parts of the set. Thinking about this as a place to start adding in pattern and color and sort of an edge that the young people would bring into this high class party. This photo especially made me think about the combination of high-low. In fashion of the time, also within budgeting, when budgeting for a play. We have a leather skirt. That would be expensive, but it would be so cool when they're dancing. You'd get a lot of movement, and it's paired with an inexpensive t-shirt. So those are good ways to start thinking about how budget would play in as well. So from here, I start to look at things that the other characters could wear and where there might be solid pops of color versus pattern pops of color in a way that would juxtapose very nicely and move as they move throughout the set. Lastly, I started to look at accessories of the time. So maybe a solid dress gets paired with a bold accessory to keep things exciting. And that is all that I have for my presentation. And in talking about moving to Zoom, I like to think about the fact that in Shakespeare's time, they weren't using fancy costumes. They were using whatever their patrons donated to them and then making one or two small pieces that were more accessories. So that's a great way to think about it at home. What do you have and what do you have that could, you know, make this character for you? Also, it's important to think about how the clothes make you feel. If the clothes make you feel like you can embody the character while acting, then they're the right clothes to make the costume. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome, perfect. Thank you, Amy. Do we have any notes for Amy, Anna?
No, not right now. I usually work more closely with the costume designer when I can see actors try on costumes in person.
Yeah, and we have fittings scheduled yet?
Not yet, actually. Would you be able to come into a rehearsal to grab those fittings with the actors?
That sounds great.
Perfect. Can we fit that into our rehearsal schedule, Anna?
Yep, I am ahead of schedule on blocking, so we should have some time on maybe Wednesday or Thursday.
Perfect. I will remind everybody of this in the report. But now that we've gotten through every specific department, I'd like to open it up back to everyone. So if we could have everyone back on the call, please. Gorgeous. So often in theater, departments will have to work together on a couple of different overlapping aspects in the technical world for the show. So does anyone have any interdepartmental conversations they would like to start?
I
Yeah.
just want to, Katie and I are on the same wavelength.
There you go.
We got it.
Go ahead, Krista.
Yeah, I know Katie and I are really excited to start merging lighting elements into the set. It might be in like accentuating parts of the set or like actually adding a chandelier or three maybe. So I'm hopeful about that.
Yes, I would love to talk to you about adding some of those elements into the set and how we can do that most effectively. So awesome. I also want to get my colors to Amy as soon as possible. So I'll get you some samples of the specific tones that I'll be using so you can make sure that costumes aren't affected by my color choice.
That sounds great. Thank you, Katie. And Michael, hopefully we could touch base before fittings about mic packs.
Oh yeah, that sounds really good. Especially, I don't want to have any kind of mics that are going to be inhibiting choreography for movement with your costumes. And also, if there's going to be any kind of like funky 80s earrings or jewelry or like avant-garde headgear, that we'd want to put the microphones on the opposing ear to anything that would be jangling.
Yes, there will definitely be accessories. So let's touch base on that.
I had a feeling. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you. And Anna, while we're talking about things jangling, maybe you and I can touch base about shoes that you might need for choreography.
Awesome. Yes, you know me. I love Converse All-Stars for an 80s show and truly for any show. So many colors of Converse I'm in.
Beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Easy to dance in.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. We can definitely keep talking about all of these in our future production meetings, and I'm sure we'll touch base more when we see each other in person, when you guys come into rehearsals and check out what we're doing there. But please feel free to reach out to me if you need any further assistance or any further questions answered, or anything you might need. I'm here for you, and so is Anna, but I'm really here for you. Does anything else, Anna?
No. I'm really excited to be working with this team.
Perfect. I'm really excited for this team and this production. Thank you, everyone, for our first wonderful production meeting. And thank you all for your hard work.
And thank you to my friends, Annie, Katie, Krista, Michael, and Amy for helping me with this project. To all of our Drama in the Classroom students who made it to the end of this video, I hope that you learned a little bit about some of the cool jobs you can have in theater that have nothing to do with being on stage or acting. All of these people still use their bodies, voices, and imaginations to bring stories to life, but they do it in a completely different way. Feel free to ask your teaching artist or artists any questions you may still have. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. Bye.